Hi, welcome to another session of Word Crumbs. Today is Tuesday of the 20th week of Ordinary Time. And if you were following the reflection yesterday, you would know already that this week we're going to deepen on the topic of grace. The readings themselves will enlighten us during this week. And I won't say so much already because I'll just let the readings explain themselves. Before we go to today's reflections, though, it's just a very quick recap of what we've been doing this last week. And if you remember, last week we were talking about community and the role of community of faith. What is community? What's the essence? Why community is important for us as Christians, in the sense of what does it do for us? And lastly, how should we live community? And we were talking about humility in order to welcome. So being in community helps us to realize we're just like everybody else if we're humble enough, and to welcome everybody unconditionally for one thing, which is the experience of faith, to nourish the faith of everybody. So being in community is not just about what I do for people, but it's to introduce them to the experience of God. And through that experience of God, that they may experience the real welcome that comes from Him. So, in a nutshell, there's just three words, no? That I just summarize it. We are talking about a community for the sake of faith, and then community where charity is practiced through welcome, and thirdly, which is this week, community as a place to experience grace. So this invitation of Jesus not to love like Him. If you remember about forgiveness of enemies and the indissolubility of marriage, etc., it's not meant to be lived by our own human efforts. No, it's not like, oh, I'm a Christian, so I should be stronger. This week we're going to see that that's not the case. The case here is about Jesus giving us the grace so that we could live that higher standards, if you like, of Christian loving, of loving like Jesus. So it's a matter of receiving grace in order to live that. So in other words, it's not just what I have to do, but it's the gift that God wants to give to me to live like Him. So that's where we're going somehow in this week on the topic of grace. Now, going to the topic of grace itself, it's very important to realize when we ponder on such words, religious terms that have been around for hundreds of years, millennia, literally. It's not about just getting one idea, of it, but getting different dimensions, learning to look at it at different perspectives that scriptures themselves tell us. And so each day we're just going to see different dimensions and to experience how we can apply them to our daily lives, not of learning how to live in grace, how to live by grace, how to live according to the grace that we receive each day. And of course, it begins with learning how to pray. Now, today, the passage is Matthew 19:23 to 30. Matthew 19:23 to 30. And it's about the follow-up of the encounter between Jesus and the rich young man. We already did that passage yesterday and a kind of introduction. And today, where Jesus says, "Now, if you want to be perfect, be detached from everything, sell everything, give it away to the poor, have treasure in heaven, and follow me." So it's an invitation to follow Jesus in a life of grace if we are seeking that perfect fulfillment or that perfect satisfaction as human beings, as religious beings, if you like. Religious not in the sense that we are priests or nuns, but religious in the sense that all of us have that aspiration for God. And so Jesus says, "Follow me and you will reach the fullness, the satisfaction of your souls, if you like, not of your hearts." Today, the disciples ask him a question. It's like, this insistence of Jesus saying, It's difficult for a rich man to enter into heaven, the kingdom of heaven. And we know the expression, no? It's easier for a camel to enter the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter into heaven. And so the disciples ask, oh my goodness, so who can be saved then? Who can do that? And the response of Jesus is very telling for us today about what grace is all about. By human resources, it is impossible. But for God, nothing is impossible. So Jesus pulls it to the extremes. He says it's impossible by human efforts. He didn't say it's harder. He didn't say it's difficult. He said it's impossible. So meaning, Christian life or living a Christian way of life, this life of grace, is not about trying harder. It's not just about trying harder in your marriage. It's not just about trying harder to forgive. It's not just about trying harder to be humble or to welcome others. Jesus pulls it to the extremes because it's impossible to do it by yourselves, even if you try harder. What he's saying is, try to live with grace. Live by grace and allow God to be the one to work in you and through you, to love through you, to see things and others differently through you, that it is God loving in you and through you, which is very different from you trying to love like God. Just to think about it, it's not about trying harder to love like God, but it's about allowing God to love in and through you. Let Him have you as an instrument of love, no? As we sometimes say. So for God, nothing is impossible, but by yourself, it's impossible. So Christian life is about learning to live by that grace that God gives every day. So now on the practical side of it, you might ask, so how do I do that? How do I live by grace every day of my life, or how do I learn it? And the main concept that we can pick up from today, that I'd like to propose also, is about this idea of receiving every day from God and living life as a response. So receiving and responding to life as a grace from God. The opposite of that would be to control my life. Okay? So, and I think the opposite of living by grace and receiving it every day and responding to it every day, the opposite would be to control life. Now I'm going just to play with these two images. Why do I say receiving life? Another way of understanding it is being surprised that life could be bigger. That what I understand about my life could be bigger than what I have understood until now. What I understand about relationships could be bigger than what I understand about relationships until now. All about the limits of my love, of the people I should care about, could be bigger than what I think today. And the opposite would be to control it. That my life, I want my life to be about this. I want my relationships to be about this. And I want the people I care about to be just these few. For example, grace is about allowing God to expand our hearts to include more of life and more of others. My life and also the life of others. And controlling, if you think about it, could be about the fear of letting more of life into my heart, letting more of others into my heart. So, living a life of grace is basically allowing God to give me His perception, of what life is all about, of what relationships are all about, of what my responsibilities are all about. And the opposite will be to try to control, and the effects of trying to control, uh, we are very familiar with them by now. It could be boredom, it could be frustration, it could be a lack of motivation with the things that used to motivate me. And that's why these words of Jesus yesterday can be a real key to understand this. If you want to be perfect, if you really want to be satisfied as a human being, you cannot deny yourself this desire to grow beyond and to see a bigger world. You can't deny yourself that. But you can't do it by your own resources. You can't make your world bigger by trying to control it uh, and to tell yourself what it should be. You can only allow your life, your desire for a greater life to be fulfilled by allowing God to show you through life circumstances, through your relationships, through your difficulties even, and your challenges. You're stuck, or you're, I don't know, you're not motivated, or even your anger, your frustration. Allow God to be the one to show you what life could be more. So it's a lot about surrendering and asking God every day, what do you want to show me today, Lord? It could be a very enthusiastic tone, what do you want to show me? Or it could be a tone of pleading, what do you want to show me in the midst of all this? Help me to see, Lord, so that I can respond. Again, grace, receiving life as a grace and responding to the grace by asking God, what does He want to show me? And we will be surprised. It's a practice. It's a habit of living by grace. So it's a kind of turning topsy turvy our lives. Instead of starting from ourselves, our own perceptions, our control, our own ideas, to turn it upside down and allow God to be first instead. What God wants, what He thinks, what He feels, and what He's asking me to do or to learn this day. So if we practice that every day, then we start to live a life of grace, of depending not on my own personal human resources, but on learning to depend on God, for whom nothing is impossible. This phrase is so important. Nothing is impossible for God. And many times our own frustrations come when we feel that the deepest desires that we have for life, for love, for ourselves, for others, etc., when we feel that it is impossible to fulfill these desires. There's a deep, hidden loss of hope. Loss of hope for these deepest desires that I have. And living life of grace is allowing God to awaken and bring out gradually these desires and showing me how to fulfill them. So as you see, the reflection of this week is bringing us very deep into our interior selves. Because Christian life is very deep. It's not just about doing things. It's not just about being charitable, forgiving, etc., because we have to. It's about connecting to the deepest desire of being fulfilled as a person. And that means giving time or spending time to go deep in our prayer, going deeper into knowing ourselves and knowing God through a real investment in our faith, life, in how we live every day our faith. So I just leave you with two questions if you'd like to help us to gradually enter into this reflection on grace. Not a life living in grace. It's really a gift. We need to experience it. That our Christian life would be really halfway or limited to the Old Testament if we don't live in grace. So the questions would be, first is, um, at this moment in your life, what do you really desire? What do you really desire at this moment of your life? This may not be an easy question to answer because there are different layers of our desires. To go deeper, if you like even to write them down, what are these desires? No, it doesn't have to be a one day reflection, okay? It could be depending on the stage of our lives, depending on our personal situations, we might need to really spend time to go deep in this question. What do I really want? Have I reached the perfection and the satisfaction of my deepest self? Am I frustrated? Am I bored? Am I tired? Or do I lack motivation? Maybe it's because I've gotten stuck at a certain level and haven't gone deeper to understand the deep desires that I still have and I maybe don't believe in anymore. So this week, let's ask for the grace and this faith to really go deep and to revisit those deepest desires, not in a way to control my life again, but to allow God to gradually, daily, reveal the way to satisfy these desires. Okay, because we can't ignore them when they come. We can do it for a while, but in the long term, we need to allow God to respond to these desires through grace, through Jesus, whom He wants to give us this grace. But we need to open ourselves to Him, which leads to the second question that can complement this first one, not just to know my desires, but to ask each day, Lord, Father, or Jesus, what do you want to show me about my life today? Let's make this question wider. What do you want to show me about my life, about myself, about the persons, the significant persons around me, perhaps the people I have been caring about and I still do care about, perhaps the relationships that I have in society, my relatives, my friends, my workmates, colleagues. What do you want to tell me about them, about the way I relate to them, about the way I perceive, the way they relate to me, and what this relationship should be about? What do you want to tell me? What do you want to tell me about my difficulties, my struggles at this time in my life? Maybe small, maybe big. We're all in a different moment, we're all different. But in me, Lord, what do you want to show me about them through your grace? And how can I respond to these things? So these are the daily, what I mean is, ask God what He wants to show you about your daily life, your relationships and your responsibilities in life, in your Christian life, and how He's inviting you to live it more in grace, and the particular responses that He's asking you to give, small steps to respond to that life of grace.